So no matter where you looked, Rome's story is on repeat. It's like that commercial that's been stuck in your head for 5, 10, 20 years, and it never goes away. It's lodged itself in there. That story has made its way into your subconscious. And this is what Rome was doing. So what Paul does here in this back half of Colossians 1 is that he cobbles together what some consider to be an early hymn of the church that goes toe to toe with the marketing machine of Rome. Because here's the thing, in the ancient world, images of peace and prosperity masked the reality of inequality and violence. Remember, Rome said that it was peacefully taking over the world. Rome was trying to establish peace in the world. But how does Rome establish peace? By raping and pillaging and burning cities down and crucifying people. But they call this peace. So in their symbols, in their story, they're peaceful symbols. That's what we're trying to do. Now bring it into modern day for us. In the same way, contemporary images projected by advertising mask the reality of sweatshops, and inequality, and domestic and international violence created by what? By our lifestyles. So what are the hard words here? What is Paul saying to you and me? He's saying, hey, wake up. Look past the slick marketing and the stories that your society tells you that lead you to believe things about yourself and the world that are not true. Look behind the story. Look behind the people and the things and the powers and the products that you align yourself with. Don't be lazy. Don't be careless. And don't let your imagination be used. Because if someone else takes your imagination, that's when things get dangerous. Think of it like this. If you don't use your imagination, somebody else is going to use it for you. Paul is touching on something here in this passage. He's saying that there is a power that is contained in our imaginations that helps us see this world and operate differently in this world. Our imaginations actually have the power to create alternative realities, alternative options in the middle of empire, in the middle of the mess. So Paul's imaginative hymn in the first chapter of Colossians is nothing less than treason. Why? Because in his 3 short stanzas, he is subverting every major claim of the empire. So what does this mean for you and I? Let's give a few examples. First, to moms and dads out there. Moms and dads, give your kids an alternative way to think about the world. Give them the tools. Stir up a defiant imagination within them. So whether you do that by managing screen time like we talked about last week, exactly what video games your kids play or what they watch or how much time they spend in front of the screen, or it's how you deal with problems that come home from school, or when you're having a blowout with your spouse and your kids are within earshot. Because the way you handle video games and the way you handle the problems from school and the way you handle your spouse who you are not getting along with tells your kids who you think rules the world. And that's going to take effort on your part and mind and creativity and imagination to create a better alternative. What about somebody else? Business owners out here. What if you could give your employees a peek into the kingdom of God by the way that you treat them? What if you set up some sort of system? What if you stoked your defiant imagination and made your employees in your company the employees that are treated better than any other employees in your particular field? What would it be like if you created the best work world possible for your employees, or for your customers, or for your students, or for those that you work with? Because the way you handle those kinds of people tells them, signifies who you think rules the world, whose empire, whose story you've locked into. Let's try one more example for good measure. For those of us who are here today who are caught up in busted relationships, what would it be like if Jesus was actually the one who ruled in that broken relationship? But if you identified this morning as a disciple of Jesus, things are different for you. Things are different for me. Because Jesus is Lord, because he rules the world, you and I have an alternative option. We can imagine a better way, the way of Jesus, a way to deal with trouble and the way to create new realities. And I'm serious about that part. Because check this out. So the word Adam for earthling or like human being, it's a word that describes all of humanity. The root word for Adam in Hebrew language is part of the same root word for imagination, which is Adameh. So check this out. Put those two things together. So when God sends Adam out, when God sends us out and he says, steward the earth, be co-creators with me, this is partly what he has in mind. He's saying, can you imagine a better world? Can you create a better world just with your words, just with your actions? It's within your power. It's within your capacity. So with all of that in mind, the big question that comes to you and I this morning is this: where do you need to imagine a better world? Where does it need to happen? Or are you even thinking about it? Do you need to dream up an alternative way of being with your spouse, with your work, in the city of Saskatoon? Or maybe the question is, maybe you've just been going along with it. Where have you gone along with the symbols and the lies and the story of empire? Where have you just been sort of sucked into that and just done it the way everybody else does it? Maybe for you, the pinpoint question is this: where does this defiant imagination, inspired by God's Spirit, need to kick in your life? Listen, God has given him joy in the midst of the suffering, and he is also rejoicing, check it out, because his suffering lessens the suffering of others. Are you picking that up? God just doesn't want you to suffer. God doesn't think, I want you to hurt, I want you to bleed. To be a Christian, you got to be in pain. Pain is not the goal. Paul is rejoicing because his pain and his suffering is accomplishing something. And Paul pulls it in here and says that suffering that you're feeling, that discipleship under pressure, that thalipsis, that is a sign that the kingdom of God is taking root. This is a sign of the renewal of all things. And yes, we know there are big, huge, systemic lies, structural lies that suck us into this big empire we find ourselves in. But also, there are very tailored, individual, customized, specific, tiny lies that have been spoken over us and threaten to take us captive, to make us believe things about ourselves and this world that are not true. And as we hear that story over and over and over and over and over again, as it rings in our head, we begin to believe lies. And then we turn into zombies, walking through life aimlessly. So to this, Paul says to you and me, don't believe the lies. Don't let your imagination be carried away. Don't allow yourself to be formed by the stories of lies that about you that just aren't true. He says, remember the true story, the real story, your founding story. Repeat it, rehearse it. And that's why I think Paul goes through the trouble of repeating our founding story here in Colossians. He says it again, one more time, because you and I are apt to forget who Jesus is and who we are in light of that.